Welcome back to our channel, where we bring Viking history to life. Before we dive into today's incredible story of brotherhood and betrayal, please hit that like button if you enjoy historical narratives. Subscribe to join our growing community of history enthusiasts and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. We love connecting with viewers from different countries. Now let's journey back to the fierce lands of the north, where honor and ambition collide. The wind howled across the rugged coastline of what would one day be called Norway, carrying with it the salt spray of the North Sea and the distant cries of seabirds. In the great hall of Jarl Thorvald, two young men knelt before the sacred altar stone, their hands clasped together over an ancient blade that had tasted the blood of their ancestors. Olav and Leif, sons of the respected warrior Gunnar the Bold, were about to perform the most sacred ritual known to their people, the blood oath of brotherhood. Though they shared the same father and mother, this ceremony would bind them not just as siblings, but as shield brothers for life. The flickering flames of the great hearth cast dancing shadows across the carved wooden pillars that supported the massive hall. Ravens, sacred to Odin the All-Father, were etched deep into the oak beams, their eyes seeming to watch the solemn proceedings below. The scent of burning pine and the lingering aroma of the evening feast filled the air, while outside, the endless Norwegian winter painted the landscape in shades of white and grey. Olav, the elder by 3 winters, stood tall and broad-shouldered like their father. His hair, the color of autumn wheat, was braided with small iron rings that clinked softly when he moved. His blue eyes, sharp as winter ice, held the intensity that spoke of natural leadership. At 22, he had already proven himself in 3 raiding seasons, earning respect among the warriors for his strategic mind and unwavering courage. Beside him, Leif presented a different figure entirely. Younger by those crucial 3 years, he possessed a lean, agile build that served him well in quick strikes and swift retreats. His hair was darker, like storm clouds gathering before thunder, and his green eyes held a restless energy that sometimes worried the elders. Where Olav was methodical and thoughtful, Leif was impulsive and passionate, yet his skill with blade and bow was undeniable. "By the hammer of Thor and the wisdom of Odin," intoned the old seer, her voice creaking like ship timbers in a storm, "these sons of Gunnar seek to bind their fates together. Let the gods witness their words and judge their hearts." The seer, known simply as Runa throughout the settlement, was ancient beyond counting. Her white hair hung in thin braids adorned with bones and small stones, and her milky eyes seemed to see far beyond the physical world. She had overseen countless such ceremonies, but tonight felt different to her old spirit. There was a tension in the air that spoke of great deeds and greater sorrows to come. Olav spoke first, his voice carrying clearly through the hall to where their kinsmen had gathered to witness this sacred moment. "I, Olav, son of Gunnar the Bold, grandson of Eric the Far-Travelled, swear by my honor and my blood that I shall stand beside my brother Leif in all battles, in all ventures, and in all times of need. His enemies shall be my enemies, his victories my victories. Should he fall, I shall avenge him. Should I fall, let him carry on our family's honor." The young man drew the ceremonial knife across his palm, allowing his blood to drip onto the ancient stone. The red drops seemed to disappear into the weathered granite, as if the stone itself was drinking deeply of the offering. Leif's turn came, and though his voice trembled slightly with emotion, his words rang out with equal conviction. "I, Leif, son of Gunnar the Bold, grandson of Eric the Far-Travelled, swear by my honor and my blood that I shall stand beside my brother Olaf in all battles, in all ventures, and in all times of need. His path shall be my path, his glory my glory. Together we shall bring honor to our family name and fear to our enemies. May the gods strike me down if I break this sacred bond." As Leif's blood joined his brother's on the altar stone, a sudden gust of wind rattled the great doors of the hall, causing the flames to dance wildly and casting strange, shifting shadows across the assembled faces. Some of the older warriors exchanged glances, recognizing this as a sign from the gods, though whether favorable or ominous, None could say. The brothers clasped their bleeding hands together, their blood mingling as it had in their mother's womb. Around them, the gathered warriors began the traditional chant of brotherhood, their deep voices creating a haunting harmony that seemed to make the very walls of the hall vibrate with ancient power. Their father, Gunnar, watched from his place of honor near the high seat. Now past his 50th winter, his once golden beard had turned silver, and his face bore the weathered lines of countless battles and long voyages. Yet his eyes still held the fire that had made him legendary among the northern clans. As he observed his sons binding themselves together, pride swelled in his chest, though a small voice in the back of his mind whispered warnings he could not quite understand. "The oath is sworn," declared Runa, raising her gnarled staff toward the smoky rafters. "Let no man speak against these shield brothers, for they are now one in purpose and destiny. May the gods grant them wisdom in their choices and strength in their trials." The hall erupted in cheers and the clashing of weapons against shields, the traditional salute for newly sworn brothers. Horns of mead were raised, and the celebration that followed would be remembered for years to come. Tales were told, songs were sung, and the brothers basked in the warmth of their community's approval. As the night wore on, and the mead flowed freely, Olaf and Leif found themselves sitting apart from the revelry, speaking quietly of their dreams and ambitions. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, casting a warm, intimate light over their corner of the great hall. "We shall be the greatest warriors the North has ever seen," Leif declared, his eyes bright with drink and dreams. "Our names will be sung in halls from here to the great cities of the South. Men will speak of the brothers who conquered lands beyond counting." Olaf smiled at his younger brother's enthusiasm, though his own thoughts were more measured. "Aye, brother, we shall achieve great things together. But remember, true honor comes not just from conquest, but from how we treat those who depend upon us. A leader must think not only of glory, but of his people's welfare." "Always the wise one," Leif laughed, clapping Olaf on the shoulder. "But you're right, of course. Together, we'll build something lasting, a legacy that will endure long after we've joined our ancestors in Valhalla." Neither brother could know, as they sat planning their shared future in the dying light of that winter evening, that the very oath they had sworn would one day become the source of their greatest conflict. The seeds of their eventual rivalry were already present in their different natures. Olaf's careful consideration versus Leif's bold ambition, Olaf's sense of responsibility versus Leif's hunger for immediate glory. But for now, they were united in purpose and bound by sacred vows. The celebration continued around them, and the future seemed bright with promise. Outside, the Norwegian wind continued its endless song, carrying with it the sense of snow and sea, while inside the great hall, two brothers dreamed of conquests yet to come, unaware that their greatest battle would eventually be against each other. As dawn approached and the last of the celebrants finally sought their beds, Olaf and Leif remained by the dying fire, still talking quietly of their plans. The altar stone, stained now with their mingled blood, seemed to pulse with a life of its own in the flickering light, as if the gods themselves were already weaving the threads of fate that would bind these brothers to a destiny neither could imagine. The first chapter of their legend had been written in blood and brotherhood. Time would tell what the remaining pages would hold. 5 years had passed since that sacred night when blood was spilled and oaths were sworn. The brothers had kept their word magnificently, fighting side by side through countless raids and battles across the North Sea. Their reputation had grown with each passing season, and their names were indeed spoken in halls from the Orkney Islands to the shores of Denmark. The settlement had prospered under their combined leadership after their father Gunnar's peaceful passing 2 winters previous. Where once stood modest wooden structures, now rose a proper stronghold with thick timber walls and a great hall that rivaled those of the mightiest jarls. The harbour bustled with long ships bearing the brothers' raven banner, and merchants from distant lands sought audience with the powerful siblings who controlled the vital trade routes along the northern coast. Yet success, as the old sayings warned, could be as dangerous as any sword-wielding enemy. It was during the early days of spring, when the ice was finally breaking free from the fjords and the promise of new raiding seasons filled every warrior's heart, that the first crack appeared in the brothers' unity. A messenger had arrived from the south, bearing news that would test their bond in ways they had never imagined. Jarl Magnus the Wealthy, ruler of the rich southern territories and one of the most powerful lords in all the northern lands, had died without a clear heir. His vast holdings, including 3 major settlements, countless farms, and control over the most profitable trade routes to the continent, were now in dispute. The regional assembly of jarls and chieftains was to convene in 1 month's time to select a successor from among the worthy candidates. The brothers received this news in their private council chamber, a smaller room adjoining the great hall where they conducted the most important business of their growing domain. Maps covered the wooden table, marked with routes their ships had traveled and territories they had either conquered or formed alliances with. The walls were lined with weapons taken from defeated enemies and gifts from grateful allies, testament to 5 years of successful leadership. "This is our chance, brother," Leif said, his green eyes blazing with excitement as he paced before the great window that looked out over their harbor. "Magnus's lands would triple our holdings and give us control over the richest territories in the north. We could become the most powerful rulers these lands have ever seen." Olaf sat quietly at the table, studying the messenger's parchment with the careful attention he gave to all important matters. His weathered hands, scarred from countless battles, traced the boundaries of Magnus's former domain as marked on their largest map. The scope of the opportunity was undeniable, but so were the challenges it would present. "The competition will be fierce," Olaf replied thoughtfully. "Jarl Thorstein of the Eastern Territories has twice our number of ships. Jarl Hilda the Iron-Willed commands the loyalty of the mountain clans. And young Jarl Eric Bloodaxe has been building alliances for years in preparation for just such an opportunity." "All the more reason to act decisively," Leif countered, finally stopping his pacing to lean across the table toward his brother. "We have advantages they lack. Our warriors have proven themselves in more battles than any of theirs. Our treasury is full from successful trading ventures. And most importantly, we have each other, 2 leaders where they have only one." The younger brother's logic was sound, and Olaf found himself nodding slowly. Their combined strength had indeed been their greatest asset throughout their partnership. Where Olaf provided strategic wisdom and diplomatic skill, Leif offered tactical brilliance and the kind of inspiring courage that made warriors willing to follow him into the very halls of the gods. "You speak truth, brother," Olaf acknowledged. "Together we could present a formidable case to the assembly. Our reputation for fair dealing would appeal to the merchants, while our military successes would impress the warriors. Yes, I believe we could secure Magnus's inheritance." But as the brothers began to plan their campaign for the succession, an unexpected complication arose. The messenger, who had been quietly waiting to be dismissed, cleared his throat respectfully. "My lords," the young man said, his voice carefully neutral, "there is one more detail I was instructed to convey. The assembly has decreed that Magnus's inheritance cannot be divided. It must pass to a single ruler, not shared between partners or allies. The tradition demands one leader for one territory." The chamber fell silent except for the distant sound of waves against the harbor walls. This changed everything. For 5 years, the brothers had ruled jointly, making decisions together and sharing both the burdens and rewards of leadership. The idea that only one of them could claim Magnus's legacy had never occurred to either brother. Leif was the first to break the silence, his voice steady but lacking its earlier enthusiasm. "Then we must decide between us. One of us should present our case to the assembly while the other remains here to maintain our current holdings." "But which one?" Olaf asked quietly, and in those 3 words lay the heart of a dilemma that would test everything they had built together. For the first time since swearing their blood oath, the brothers found themselves on opposite sides of a question with no easy answer. Both were qualified to rule Magnus's lands. Both had legitimate claims to leadership. Both had sacrificed and strived equally for their shared success. Over the following days, as spring advanced and the time for decision drew near, subtle tensions began to emerge between the brothers. Their council meetings, once marked by easy agreement and collaborative planning, became exercises in careful diplomacy. Each began to notice qualities in the other that might justify their own claim to Magnus's inheritance. Olaf found himself thinking that his greater experience and diplomatic skills made him the natural choice. He had negotiated the crucial trade agreements that filled their coffers, and his reputation for wisdom and fairness was known throughout the northern lands. The assembly would likely view him as a stabilizing influence on Magnus's sometimes fractious territories. Meanwhile, Leif began to believe that his military prowess and inspiring leadership made him the better candidate. He had personally led their most daring raids and won their most crucial battles. The warriors who would enforce any claim to Magnus's lands knew him as a commander they could follow into any danger. His youth and energy might be exactly what those rich southern territories needed. Neither brother spoke these thoughts aloud, but the distance between them began to show in small ways. They sat slightly further apart during meals. Their conversations became more formal, less intimate. The easy laughter that had once filled their private moments grew rare. The settlement's people began to notice the change in their leaders. Warriors who had served under both brothers started to quietly choose sides, some admiring Olaf's steady wisdom, others drawn to Leif's bold charisma. Merchants and craftsmen found themselves weighing which brother had been more instrumental in their prosperity. Even the servants in the great hall walked more carefully, sensing the tension that hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. It was Runa, the ancient seer who had overseen their blood oath 5 years earlier, who finally forced the issue into the open. She appeared in their council chamber one evening as the brothers sat in uncomfortable silence, studying maps they had examined 100 times already. "I have lived through many generations," the old woman said without preamble, her milky eyes seeming to see directly into their hearts. "I have watched countless friendships destroyed by the lure of power, and I have seen brothers become enemies over far less than what you now face." Both men started to protest, but Runa raised her gnarled hand for silence. "Do not insult my wisdom by pretending otherwise," she continued. "The entire settlement knows that you must choose between brotherhood and ambition. The question is whether you will allow this choice to destroy what you have built together, or whether you will find a way to honor both your oath and your aspirations." Her words hung in the air like a challenge, and for the first time in days, the brothers looked directly at each other rather than at the maps and documents that had consumed their attention. "She speaks truly," Olaf said finally, his voice heavy with emotion. "We have been letting this decision poison what should be our greatest strength, our unity." Leif nodded slowly, feeling the weight of their dilemma settling upon his shoulders. "But how do we choose, brother? How do we decide which of us should pursue Magnus's legacy without breaking our oath to stand together?" The ancient seer smiled mysteriously, her weathered face creasing into patterns that spoke of deep wisdom earned through long years. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "the answer lies not in choosing between your ambitions, but in remembering what your father taught you about true leadership. Gunnar the Bold was called so not because he sought power for its own sake, but because he was bold enough to do what was right, even when it was difficult." "So, with that cryptic advice, Runa departed, leaving the brothers alone with their thoughts and their maps, and the growing certainty that their next decision would shape not only their own futures, but the fate of everyone who depended upon them. Outside, the northern wind continued its eternal song, carrying with it the sense of the awakening earth and the promise of spring voyages. The longships in the harbor creaked gently at their moorings, ready to carry their crews toward whatever destiny awaited, And in the great hall, two brothers who had sworn to face all challenges together found themselves confronting the greatest test of their lives, a test that would determine whether their bond was stronger than their individual ambitions. The die was cast, and the gods themselves seemed to be holding their breath to see how this tale of brotherhood and power would ultimately unfold. 10 years had passed since that fateful spring when Magnus the Wealthy's death forced the brothers to confront the limits of their shared ambition. The decision they ultimately made would be remembered long after both had joined their ancestors in the halls of the gods. In the end, it was Leif who travelled south to the Great Assembly, armed with his brother's blessing and the full support of their combined forces. The choice had not come easily. 3 sleepless nights of debate, soul-searching, and finally, a return to the wisdom their father had instilled in them both. Olav, with his characteristic thoughtfulness, had recognized that his younger brother's passionate energy and military reputation would better serve the fractious southern territories that needed a strong hand to unite them. But more importantly, both brothers had realized that their true strength lay not in competing against each other, but in extending their partnership across greater distances and challenges. Leif did indeed win Magnus's inheritance, his inspiring presence, and Olav's strategic support, swaying the assembly in his favor. Yet he ruled those rich southern lands not as an independent jarl, but as the southern extension of the brothers' combined domain. Olav remained in the north, managing their traditional territories and the crucial trade networks that funded their growing power. Their innovation, ruling as partners across vast distances, communicating through trusted messengers, and gathering twice yearly for joint councils, became a model that other ambitious leaders attempted to copy. The raven banners of the brothers flew from the northern fjords to the southern plains, and their combined fleet became the largest and most feared naval force in all the northern seas. The blood oath they had sworn in their youth had not been broken, but rather had evolved into something greater than either had originally imagined. They had learned that true brotherhood was not about always being in the same place, but about always working toward the same goals. Their partnership had survived the test of power because they had remembered that their bond was more valuable than any individual achievement. Years later, when skalds sang of the legendary brothers who had ruled vast territories without ever raising swords against each other, they spoke of the wisdom that had allowed love and loyalty to triumph over ambition and pride. The tale became a lesson for future generations about the true meaning of brotherhood, not the sharing of everything equally, but the wisdom to know when sacrifice and trust could achieve more than competition and division. And in the great halls, where mead was drunk and stories were told, old warriors would nod knowingly and say that the gods themselves had smiled upon two brothers who chose honor over power and had been rewarded with both. The northern winds still sing their ancient songs over the lands that once knew the brothers' rule, carrying with them the memory of an oath kept and a bond that proved stronger than the greatest temptations the world could offer. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Viking history and brotherhood. If this story of loyalty and wisdom resonated with you, please give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more tales from the age of the Vikings, and let us know what other historical stories you'd like to see explored on our channel.